Skateboarding in Knoxville, when did it start? When did the first skateboarder skateboard? Who knows? There were toy boards made in the 60s, but nobody really avidly skateboarded more than just it's a pogo stick or a hula hoop. Skateboarding didn't exist as a sport, way of life, a true, like, I'm a skateboarder. You didn't live skateboarding until the 70s. And when there were demos at Westtown Mall by professionals, whoa, professional skateboarders doing a demo, and skate parks in Knoxville, that's when skateboarding became something that was way more than a toy you had in the garage. And, now, 50 years later, many of us are still skating today that were at these skate parks and at these demos that were in the 70s. And 50 years now, we're still skateboarding. So 1974, June, I got my first real skateboard. It had urethane wheels, trucks that turned. It had kind of built-in grip tape, so it wasn't what the pros were, riding in California, but it was not a toy. This was a good skateboard. It did have loose ball bearings on it. And, I would clean those things, take them apart, put them together. That stuff isn't easy. Then one day, about 75, maybe 76, this guy from, that lives in my neighborhood, Doug Walker, comes skating by my house on a board with OJ wheels, and it has real precision bearings in it. Whoa.
Skating down the street, and at this four-way intersection, saw Brian Beauchesne, and we just kind of trying to roll off a curb, somebody's sidewalk, about a 4-inch curb. We rolled off that. We thought it was so cool. I don't know. That's when we became pretty good friends.
First time I saw skateboarding was I had an older brother and some guys in the neighborhood, and that was probably when I was about 6 or 7 years old. 75, 76, when skateboarding started to get popular. And I thought, that looks interesting. So I just kind of picked up a skateboard and watched my brother and the other guys do tricks and just started learning from those guys. My first board was a California Freeformer, just a plastic, not even precision bearings, just loose ball bearing board.
I got a plastic Veriflex for Christmas in 1980. I was 5 years old, I was 5 years old. Took it out, rode it down one hill, ate the streets, picked the gravel out of my arm and my leg, and put it in the closet and never thought about it again until I moved to Fort Sanders. And the day I became a skateboarder, I had just moved to the neighborhood. My brother and I were exploring the neighborhood on our bicycles, and we were going down the alley on the street next to our street. And as I was going down the alley, you could see just the corner of the THC half pipe sticking out of the trees. And as I'm going by, it was either Brian or Doug. Somebody clicked out of it and back in, and I laid on the brakes of my bike, and I looked up, the clouds parted, rays of sunshine came down, and that minute I became a skateboarder. I pedaled as fast as I could back to the house, found my plastic skateboard and my stuff because we had just moved, and went back to the alley, counted houses up, went to the front of the house, counted houses up, and rode it back and forth until someone came out and got me.
I was in Gatlinburg, and our family used to go up to Gatlinburg just to run to go up and down the street there on that main drag. And we went to Orange Julius. And it was kind of this area where it was kind of set up and off the street a little bit. And I had this kind of terraced area. And we went up there and had our Orange Julius's and we're drinking them. And I heard this noise that I couldn't, it was interesting to me. I don't know what drew me to it. But I got up and I kind of walked up a few stairs and up and kind of around one of these buildings. And there was an empty pool. And these dudes were skating it. And I was like, it was like my third eye opened up. I just went, I want to do that. My dad bought my first skateboard for me. It was a Nash Executioner, bright pink, at the Kmart on Kingston Pike. I remember it was on a Sunday. I remember going over to West Hills Elementary School and riding the sidewalk from the school down to the basketball courts and just pick it up, take it back to the top of the sidewalk and ride it back down. Just to kind of figure it out.
It's hard to say the first time I saw it because growing up in the 70s, it was always in the background. You'd see it on episodes of Chips. They had skateboard trading cards, things like that. It would sort of be just, you'd see little bits and pieces of it. Started skating around with the kids in the neighborhood. My very first skateboard that I got was a Nash Executioner. And, just seeing skateboard for the first time, what it really looked like, back in the day, we had Thrasher magazine, Transworld magazine, we'd see still pictures or maybe sequence shots once a month. Once a year, there might be a video.
So Christmas time in '74 is when I got my first skateboards. And one was a Black Knight, which was a really cool clay wheel board. And the other one was a orange double kicktail plastic thing, and that was Christmas '74.
The first skateboard that I got was a Nash Locals Only, kind of bright hot pink. I'm not sure what motivated me to get that at the time, but I know that I probably rode that for a good year or so before I decided, hey, this is for me.
I think when you're a kid, like every kid wants to learn how to fly. So I'm watching my brother play Tony Hawk and hitting these ramps. These guys are using boards to hit a ramp and basically fly in the air. And I was just like, dude, I got to figure out how to do that.
My older brother and the neighbors, everybody said, we're going to West Town Mall for a skateboard demo. And so, we all piled up and take off. And, it was just mind blowing to watch those guys skate, because you see a magazine, but you don't see it in person.
Then the skate parks open. Orange Wave open. Super Bowl in South Knoxville. Rainbow Skate Park. Even one out in Maryville.
Concrete Surf was a pretty good park. It had a pretty good snake run, and it had a bigger bowl and a smaller bowl. And it was about after the first year it was open, they put in a pool, which was, I'm assuming 10 foot deep with a channel, and it had really gnarly pool coping.
First time I ever rode a Knoxville skateboard park was in August of '77. It was the first day of Orange Wave Skate Park. I went in there thinking, I got these kids, because a lot of them just had plastic boards and stuff. And as soon as I started going over some humps and stuff, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Where you want to skate today? Let's drive out to Chapman Highway. Let's drive out to Maryville. All right, back to Orange Wave. We had the choice of 4 skate parks, any given day. And then all that stuff, gone.
The very first pro demo that I went to was the Madrid demo down at Inner Wheel. I'm not sure if Skate Hut was even open at that point. It was at Inner Wheel down on Sutherland. And I remember they had this car set up in the middle of it. And it was Bill Danforth, Bryce Knights, Mike Smith, Greg Smith, a freestyle guy, Klaus Grabke. But that was the first time I'd ever seen professional skateboarders in person doing their thing. And once again, being a young skater, I was completely blown away by it. I couldn't get enough of it. At the end, they just bashed the car to pieces and the glass was flying everywhere, and I just couldn't get enough.
Yeah, having professional skateboarders come to Knoxville was a huge deal anytime it happened because we were so starved to see any professional in this area of the country ever.
Then after that, everybody went to the THC ramp and skated vert with, I guess, Mike Smith and Klaus Gropke. We got pictures of them.
In the late 80s, it was still a very niche experience to be a skateboarder. Very misunderstood, and then even as it sort of gradually became more and more popular, people tried to relegate it to being a sport, which it's not. It's a kinetic art form. It has more to do with dancing than it does with football.
So in 1982, there was a World's Fair in Knoxville. The town went crazy. There's people from all over the country here.
The 1982 World's Fair, you got to be there.
When it shut down, the whole World's Fair site, they just turned out the lights, walked away from it, and all this skateboard canvas just lay in front of us. We found this secret spot. It's unbelievable. It's in downtown Knoxville, but it's just surrounded by stuff where nobody can see it. So I go up there and start skating it a little bit, tell my buddies, yeah, there's a spot up here. We just take some of the doors off the building, the plywood, throw it down, start skating on it. Just really wretched little stuff. Start skating on it. The next day we bring hammers, build a little more stuff. The next day some more wood. Rip off some wood off these dilapidated buildings, build more stuff, and it just kept going.
Yeah, we used to skate the unfair a lot. It was like 2 different versions. A bunch of homemade ramps. That was really great. Then it got to be better.
Thrasher sent out Bryce Knights to take pictures of it and do some documentation. And Bryce shows up and his jaw just drops. He's like, there's no way we could ever get away with this stuff in California, anywhere. And it's like, we can't even believe we're getting away with it here. But anyway, let's skate.
Here in Knoxville, skateboarding is gaining popularity. It's the daredevil sport of the 80s, and it's here in Gene Patterson's 10 Country.
On this deserted lot among these makeshift ramps, tomorrow's daredevils train in the hot sun. These young men are skateboarders, a sport that takes skill, timing, and a certain amount of courage.
I've got one right here, and I've got some knee burns, and I've got one all over my back where I fell off that ramp over there.
That's from skateboarding?
Yeah.
Now, why do you do it?
The glory of skating, really, and flying through the air.
I think I was 11 years old, and I was starting to get my chops on a skateboard. I was able to do big airs over the ace ramp. I could blast out of the air to bank. I could ride the big vert quarter pipe. Like, I could hit all of it. I was grinding the snowplow ramp, and Bryce Knights, for some reason, put me in Thrasher magazine, and I was at junior high. I was a little bit of a local celebrity just for making Thrasher magazine at 11 years old.
It was incredible, and the fact that it didn't have permission, and that's sort of what led to the downfall of it. It went pretty quick too. Right after the Thanksgiving, by the end of the year, it was like, you guys out of here, we're taking the stuff. So we had to get over there real fast one day with some trucks and get as much out as we could.
It finally met its demise. We kind of took that attitude and put it on some old tennis courts. And at that point, we'd done this awesome, DIY, the unfair. We're like, well, let's turn it up a notch. We had these 5 tennis courts. We just turned it up to 11. We built ramps that were giant. Just everywhere you looked, they weren't 3-foot tall ramps. They weren't 4-foot tall ramps. They were 5-foot tall kicker ramps.
I have one memory of going to the cage, and I think I probably only got to go there one time. And I just remember just dropping in on the speed ramp. I mean, it was just so scary and just a trick in itself and an accomplishment.
The DIY attitude, you know, one place gets busted, take all those ramps, put them somewhere else until that place gets busted.
And it seemed like it lasted for a while, but then it also pretty abruptly got shut down. And the funny thing is, I remember we were all so outraged and upset because the city came and shut it down. But now as a grown man, I'm surprised they didn't do it sooner, and they should have, because some of those roll-ins were, you know, 2x4s set up on top of cinder blocks and made that way like out of a shipwreck 20 feet high.
The news sentinel came out, took a bunch of pictures of us. We were standing there, like big newspaper articles about us, you know. We were standing there, me and Brian just standing there going, let us in. Why'd you lock us out? You know?
So we went and we marched on City Hall. And we went pickets, you know, let us skate, and, you know, open the skate park, and, you know, all this kind of thing. And, you know, the TV cameras showed up.
Local skateboarders call it the Cage. It's a fenced-in tennis court at Tyson Park where the youngsters can practice their moves safely. But they're up in arms because city park officials have ordered the area closed. As Norman Hammett reports, the kids were out in force protesting the action.
These skateboarders would rather ride the ramps than carry signs, but they have no choice. City officials have decided to close their skateboarding park and tear down $3,000 worth of handmade ramps. It's the only facility of its kind in the city.
I wish they'd reopen it because I see it as a safe place for kids to recreate and to practice a healthy sport.
The park officials disagree. They consider the area a high risk. The remote site is unsupervised, and the main concern is money, not to repair damages, but to repair children should they get hurt.
Close our cage. Lock us in, not out.
So the kids grabbed their signs and boards and skated to City Hall. They were soon joined by curious onlookers and supportive parents who don't want to see their children forced to ride in the streets.
Streets are bumpy and cracked and concrete, you know, so that would be dangerous.
Within the last week, several children have been hit by cars, such as the bicycle incident where a young girl was killed by a speeding car. And I don't want that to happen to me or my friends.
The skateboarders and their supporters hope a compromise with the city can be reached soon. But until that happens, the cage will remain closed and the youngsters will have to find another place to practice.
Skated around in front of the City County building. Of course, got, you know, Get the News there, Get Daily Beacon, whoever else was around. But that was the beginning of, like, let's get a skate park, and that was in '87. So we didn't get a skate park till 2008.
In the 1980s, we could occasionally get a skateboard, a good skateboard or wheels at a, you know, a sporting goods store or something like that. Some of them dabbled in it a little bit, but it's the skateboarding declined, less people doing it. It's not popular. The skate parks are closed. You know, all these sporting goods stores just quit carrying skateboards at all. You know, they would carry junky toys, but we didn't want none of that. In Knoxville, you couldn't buy a skateboard. You couldn't get a good skateboard anywhere. So we came up with a plan of opening a retail store, and we never imagined that it would ever make any money or be a real job for anybody except for maybe Jay Kabler. He was working in a kitchen at the time, and he said, you know, I'd rather work at a skate shop than a kitchen. So Jay was the sole employee, and it was kind of a combination with me, Jay, Doug Walker, and Trey McReynolds.
In 1987, I remember the year, summer of '87, Brian decided he was going to start selling more boards. He was already on Schmidt stick, so I was getting his second-hand boards. So I was already sourcing my boards through him and Doug, and so they had boards. And so I guess he was thinking, I got these few boards. I just need to get you know, an order in, and I'll have a whole park or a whole shop to start.
Well, that was Brian. Yes, Skate Hut started with Brian's idea. Eventually moved to Grand Avenue where he built some ramps.
And there we had a mini half and a little street course. And it was a dirty little wretched warehouse. Man, it was poor lighting. There's rats in the back. It was just a dirty little place.
Once Skate Hut opened up, that became the hub where we all met each other. So everybody came to Skate Hut. If you were the age I was, I was about 12 when it opened up. So it was like a daycare for a lot of kids.
And people skated there, and we built it up enough to get enough money to rent a big skateboard warehouse. And at the time when we moved it from that location on Grand Avenue to West Knoxville in this bigger, real deal skate park warehouse, at that time I changed the name from Skate Hut to Pluto Sports. One, there was a Skate Hut in Rhode Island, so there was a little bit of name confusion there, and they were first. So I said, look, keep the name. We're going to be something different. We're Pluto Sports. So Pluto was a big skateboard warehouse. We'd have pro demos, charge kids to skate. It worked out for a year. For another year, it lost a little bit of money every month. And then when you're out of money, well, what are you going to do? When you can't pay the light bill, it's turn off the lights and get out of there. We went to Cumberland Avenue, totally broke, had no money. Ended up like starting all over with just a few decks on the wall, a few sets of wheels, pitiful little skate shop in a basement in a dingy alley, but we built it back up. As we were skating around town, didn't have DIYs going on or anything like that. We were looking for just anywhere we could get away with skating. And one of the places would be in downtown Knoxville at Market Square. That place was busy during the day, but at 5 o'clock downtown, ghost town.
And this was back when Market Square had 3-tiered concrete fountains on one end. And it was a natural, just skateboard crazy setup. And you could drop down on each level, or you could do a boneless off the very top and make it to the bottom. And after 5 o'clock during the week or on Saturday and Sunday, the place was dead. There would be trash tumbleweeds rolling through there, and you could pretty much skate it all the time and not get hassled too much. We could show up and skate there at will in the evenings. There were all sorts of, features there, stairs and ledges and all this stuff. And it became the hub of Knoxville skateboarding for a while. And then for a while, the University of Tennessee was also. But the university took on a no skateboarding, policy where if you weren't a student, you couldn't skate there.
Spent a lot of time skating all over UT, and the main thing was, obeying the police there and knowing when to move on and when someone's acting like, yeah, you better go because they are going to call the police on you. And that's the main thing about UT. You wanted to just flow through the whole area, never spend more than a few minutes anywhere, and you can probably still get away with it.
We had a series of backyard ramps built in Knoxville. Now, in this area where it rains a lot, plywood don't last long. So a lot of these things would get built, rot out, get torn down.
There were so many backyard ramps in Knoxville. In the late 80s. I remember the first one I kind of skated when I was kind of just starting out, I may have even been on that Nash, was Eric Treadway's ramp. He built a ramp in his backyard. It was like 7 or 8 feet tall. It was really tall, but it was really skinny. And I remember going and skating that and being terrible. So much so that they were actually making fun of me. Until Eddie Stumpfel, who lived across the street from my house and who I grew up with playing Star Wars and G.I. Joe with. He and I got into BMX bikes around the same time, and then that kind of morphed into skateboarding, and he decided to convince his dad to build him a ramp in the backyard. It wasn't the biggest or the fanciest ramp, but it was enough that I was able to learn the basics of ramp skills, tranny skills. And I skated that thing after school every day and all day on the weekends. Went back to Eric's ramp, and needless to say, they weren't laughing at me anymore.
And I used to always want to spend the night at Eddie Stumpfel's house because A, he had a half pipe in his backyard and a really hot sister.
The main one I remember is Joe Bowers in Oak Ridge. It's 2 different versions. He had a small one with a kind of a small section and then a vert section. And he tore that down and made a bigger one with a channel.
The backyard ramps I skated, it was just kind of word of mouth back in the day. Joe Bowers, I skated both of those ramps, the first and the second when it was rebuilt. Skated, God, most of those ramps you would just kind of show up at and had no idea who owned them. We were talking about a ramp that was off Lions Bend, back kind of behind a church in this woods.
Then Brock Frazier built a ramp back in the woods, really close to Eric's house. And so that ramp was cool because it was kind of one of the first wider mini ramps. It was, I think, 16 feet wide, and it was back in the woods. And then he decided for some reason to move it from that back into his yard. And so he moved it into his yard and made it bigger and had lots of good sessions on there. Of course, by that point, I actually did have some skills, and so that ramp used to get heavy sessions.
And then Mike Joyce had a 10-foot vert ramp in Oak Ridge. Now, Mike Joyce had already grown up and left, but the ramp was still in his yard, and his parents were really cool. And Eddie Stumpful and I used to jump in his Mustang too, drive out there and knock on the door, like, can we skate? And his mom was so cool, and she would it was on the side of a hill. It was kind of sketchy. If you flew off the sides, you might be flying for a little bit. But Eddie and I used to go out there, I don't know, at least 5, 6, 7 times. And like one summer, we just wore it out.
I also recall just, going from one ramp to the next, and you could skate 4 or 5 or more mini ramps in a day and just stay in Knox County.
All of those ramps seem to live like a year or two. By 3 years, they're gone. The only exception to that was the DeLong's ramp. And that thing lasted for years. And every year or so, we'd relayer. We'd just add another layer. And by the end of that thing was this thick. And we had to, because it was so heavy, we had to jack up the vert, and make it vert again because the plywood was so heavy it was causing it to be not vert. But that ramp was legendary, not only because of how long it lasted, but the scene there was just incredible because there were skaters living in the house. It wasn't moms and dads, it was skaters. And I don't know how many kegs of beer and how many parties and how many people skated there over the years. If you had a keg of beer and didn't have a place to take it, let's take it to the ramp. Party!
The THC ramp was awesome. I remember going there for the first time and learning to drop in on vert. And Ryan and Jay, I don't remember who it was at the time that was there. It was kind of the older crew. I remember just being called, a wuss or whatever because I was standing up there shaking, not being able to drop in. And they were, do it, you wuss, and I finally did it. And of course, when you drop in on vert for the first time, once you get it the first time, you're good.
Airs, grinds, and hand plants, just a few moves that describe the sport of skateboarding. But to be able to perfect a grind, one has to commit himself to hours of practice, not to mention the courage it takes to try the move. Bill Dye caught up with some boarders and has this story.
Skateboarding is not familiar to most in this area. 3 Knoxvillians are taking their skating to new heights on a home-built contraption called a half-pipe in Fort Sanders. Skateboard enthusiasts speak their own language. Listen closely.
And you wear your pads, but you can always hang up and slam or something. Hurt yourself.
Kind of describe some of the moves that we're going to be seeing out here today.
Airs, hand plants, grinds, you name it.
Kind of dangerous. It's a risky sport. It'll take about 5 years to get good at it.
Would you kind of relate it to maybe hang gliding or maybe surfing?
Maybe surfing in a way, or maybe jumping off a cliff.
It's totally different. It's creative. It's even artistic.
What do you like best about boarding?
Flying through the air. It's definitely the best part. It's not really competitive. It's hard to judge one skater against another, just like surfing or something else. There's no points. There's no winning or losing. There's just doing it.
got to have some extreme talent to do something
Nice
like
work
that.
there. I'm going to go try some hand plants and some grains.
Busy after all that, I tell you.
Control Zine began, I remember reading in Thrasher magazine, there would periodically be an article on local zines and things that people were doing that were reflecting kind of their own hometown and what they were doing. And I also was very much into the, you know, punk hardcore scene and tape trading, and zines were also part of that. So that kind of gave me the idea to start my own. Just go out with my 110 camera and take pictures of my friends doing jump ramps. And 1 out of 10 pictures might turn out and be used. I put a 50 cents or $1 on the front to give some perception of value or worth to it, but gave every one of them away, I'm sure. I'd like to thank the state of Tennessee for funding Control Zine. I would take my pictures, cut them, do my magic marker art, put it on paper in a book format, and my mom, who was a state employee, would use the state copy machine and the state paper to Xerox it, bring it back to me. I'd staple them together and hand those out. And I'd mail out quite a few and then get mailings of other people's zines, and I actually got to meet some real life people who came through town because of that. So it was a great way to connect with people outside of Knoxville, because then we didn't have social media. You had to call people on the phone or write them letters. So that was a way to find out what skate scenes looked like far away from us.
Control Zine, I didn't really realize that was Ritz magazine. I just remember seeing it and the Jane Doe magazines and stuff, and sometimes Brian wouldn't even let me have a copy of some of them.
The only local zine that I was aware of at the time was Rhett's Control Zine. And I actually, the only reason I knew about it really is because I ended up in one. It was cool. I'd never really, once again, DIY. You know, there was Thrasher, there was Transworld back then, but having kind of our own local publication that we could see people we skated with in person, even if it was just a hand Xeroxed, you know, handout mini zine, was just cool because you felt like you were, you know, not famous, but you were being recognized for your skills, you know, and you showed up in one of these zines, even if it's a local zine, it was just kind of a little pat on the back. So once again, I love that DIY attitude of just, let's put something out.
Yeah, the Wallows ditch was been around forever, since the early 70s. I guess the first time I skated was probably 1976 or 77. And that was always great. And then it advanced. We built some ramps down there, like a big wooden quarter pipe.
My friends started skating there in 76, but as there were skate parks in this area in 77, I don't need to skate in some crummy old ditch. When the skate parks all closed down, where's this ditch at again? Come on, let's go skate it. I started skating there in 1980. That would be 44 years ago from today. And I still skate there today. This ditch, known as the Wallows, named after the Hawaiian Wallows ditch, is still skating today better than ever. And it's been skated almost 50 years. It still exists today.
Doug Robbins took me there in 1976, and it said volunteer flyers across the tunnel. That was the only graffiti that was there. And those were some UT guys, and supposedly they could go all the way to the top and do kick turns and maybe tail taps or something.
But it was a drainage ditch, had these perfect walls on both sides. You could really cruise through it. And that was our first experience with a ditch.
You know, we didn't appreciate that, how hard it was, how gnarly it was, and just such a janky, dangerous ditch, because that's just where we skated. It was rough, it was abrasive, it was dirty. You know, I broke my right hand and wrist, and 3 of my fingers, they came out all sideways, you know, from it being so harsh, and, you know, chunk. And
I was taken there the first time, I think I was 10 years old, around 1985, and there used to be the Wallows jams, and it was the first time I'd ever experienced what a skateboard contest was, and it was a jam format where the only people that could judge were people that were skating in the contest. Everybody that skated in the contest got a slip of paper, and you wrote down who the gnarliest guy was.
We still skate Wallows. You know, we had a Sunday session, standing Sunday session when in the fall when it's dry. You know, with those kids, they've added a lot of good transition to it. You know, some concrete work that makes it incredible now. No worries about speed. You know, speed's your friend there now, but you just don't really want to wreck.
That thing has just stood the test of time. I mean, it's gone through several incarnations. I mean, people rode it back in the 70s, and it's still being ridden today.
The reason I got into building crazy skateboards was just comedy. It was just a funny thing. I'd sit around and say, hey, let's put some trucks on that log over there and see who can ride it the best. And eventually I saw someone kickflipping that log. And so I made a toilet skateboard. Anything we could think of, and I just started making this collection. I said, hey, it's like a circus now. So let's go take it somewhere and freak people out and ride them all around. So we would go to skateboard demos where regular skaters were and set those boards out and go ride them all around. And I took one, froze it in ice, put trucks on it. When Tony Hawk was in town, took it down and had him sign it for me. Can you sign my ice board? I had it in a cooler. So I was standing in line with a cooler. I get up there with the cooler, set it up, open it up, grab the board out. Can you sign this? Totally messed up his Sharpie. He had to like throw the Sharpie away. He couldn't sign any more autographs with the Sharpie because he was signing the ice with it and it ruined it.
I had moved to Alabama in January of '89 in the middle of 10th grade. My dad worked for TVA, and we got transferred from Knoxville to this little town called Decatur, Alabama. And my buddy Riley built this ramp in his backyard in about 91 or 92, and we used to skate that quite a bit. And then he moved away. He moved back to Decatur in about 96 to open a skate park called High Wheels. It was an outdoor park. He poured this big slab. It was all really just street ramps, and then he built this really nice, really wide mini ramp with a hip. And so that kind of got the juices flowing again on building stuff. Then also in 96, a couple approached me to help them work on building an indoor park, also in Decatur, called UV Sports. And I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial streak. And I was like, well, if I could do that for someone else in Decatur, why don't I just move back to Knoxville and open an indoor park there? I already know how to do it. I just did it for them. And Knoxville didn't really have anything at that time. So I reached out to Brian at Pluto. And I was like, hey, I'm thinking about moving back and opening this park. And he was like, dude, do it.
It was a real skate park. Indoors, charge you money to skate. But the setup was fantastic. It was designed well, it was built well, and it was run by a real skateboarder.
Every Tuesdays and Thursdays, Jay Kabler and I would meet there and skate the vert ramp, and then I would skate the jump box and the big vert quarterback with Jamie Smith.
I went to England to a punk rock festival in 1998, and I had heard through the grapevine that there was a skate park opening up. And I even have it in my journal, like, you know, I've written down the dates and the year and everything, and I'm anticipating getting back to Tennessee from England so that I can skate the new skate park, which incidentally was just down the street from where my mom lived at the time. That's when I met Mike Hathcote for the first time, and then started skating it immediately once it opened up. Every day I was right down the street.
And Mike Lance, we would all see who could do the best 360 over it, and like skated a lot, and skated with you on the corner, doing grinds in the corner.
You know, when Access first opened, it was like, man, we could still skateboard. And then the kids come up, and then we're like, I'm not sure we can skateboard anymore. I mean, those kids got so good so quick because that park was so good.
I spent a lot of time skating that park. Absolutely loved it, and kind of maybe was at my prime around that time, and it stuck around long enough to see the new wave of Knoxville skaters come in and realize that, wow, I'm no longer going to be in the top 5 in the local skate contest.
Having Access Skate Park really kept the scene alive here at a critical time of ramps being built, ramps being torn down. It was a place where you could gather and meet, and so many people got so good at that skate park because it was built so well, it was run well.
I love that park. I kind of regret selling it in hindsight, but it was fun while it lasted, and I loved it. It was great.
In 2004-ish, we started talking to a city councilman named Chris Woodhull, and about getting together and getting some ideas together for let's build a skate park.
The beginning of actually starting to put together the idea of a skate park really was a very informal conversation with Mayor Haslam. He had a foundation that had supported a lot of my inner city work. So he was very much prone toward understanding and supporting young people who needed more opportunities to express their creativity.
It took political change, but eventually the city of Knoxville believed in it. Chris Woodhull, the city councilman, Bill Haslam, the mayor, they finally figured out that other cities have done it. Our city should do it.
And around 2005 or 6, Jay Kabler and I sat down and concepted, man, we need to register KnoxvilleSkatePark.com. And so Jay bought the website, and we kind of built this one page. If you want a skate park in this town, these are the people that need to know about it. And it was the mayor and the vice mayor and the city councilman and just all the parks directors, any public information that we could glean. We put it was one page site with email links and phone numbers.
Brian, J-Cab, Nate, and all those guys, JD, were all really hustling. They were popping up at every farmer's market. They'd have a tent and just fundraising. And then it really started to get to the point where the city, we started having some favor with the city that was okay, well, let's actually try and make this thing happen.
So luckily during that period, Tony Hawk was really, well known, and he's considered a good guy, kind of softening the whole criminal vibe that some people sort of put upon skateboarders. And he was really, really interested in the idea that we had. It came pretty quickly. I'm not sure who applied for the $25,000 from the Tony Hawk Foundation, but it came our way.
We ended up getting the grant from the Tony Hawk Foundation, and then thankfully my dad, he had an amazing role as a sales manager with a prevalent billboard company, Lamar, and he was somehow able to convince them to put a large donation, I think it was $100,000 into the skate park.
And around that same time, Jay got an email from then Mayor Bill Haslam's secretary that said, please make it stop. Please take the email address down. We're going to fund you a skate park.
So when they started working on the Knoxville Skate Park, I was still, where was I at that time? I believe I was in Denver. I was running a bunch of X Games skate parks at that time. I remember getting word from someone that they were starting to work on a skate park in Knoxville. I had actually been pretty high profile in Decatur trying to get a skate park built there throughout the 90s. I was on TV and in the newspapers trying to get something going. But when I found out that they were doing something in Knoxville, of course I was interested.
All of a sudden it was well, we own this softball field down in Tyson Park that the Lady Vols are playing softball on, but Sherry Lee's about to build them a big stadium. If you guys will wait 1 year, you can have that softball field with the lights. And it was kind of an aha moment. We were we'll happily wait 1 year to let them vacate.
When I first heard that they were going to build a Knoxville skate park, I just couldn't believe it. I thought there's no way that concrete's ever going to be in this town, and I'm not ever going to be able to. I'll be so old I won't be able to skate it. And then when it finally started getting finalized, I was super excited.
And then finally there was some financing that came through for a public park in Knoxville. Everybody, of course, was excited about that prospect because it had been a long time coming. Finally, that got established, and I just spent every day there.
I also think that people in the know do understand that Knoxville has a history of skateboarders, of excellent skateboarders. People not in the know think that it's not even something that we've ever approached, but there's some history.
I just couldn't believe that it was happening. And so when construction started taking place, I was there with my camera drooling, kind of watching the daily progress.
It was a long time coming, but they finally got a world-class skate park in Knoxville after something like 17 years of, lobbying the city and getting with the mayor and city council members and drumming up support. And it was so rad to see it finally come to fruition.
Anybody that knows, if you get a park built by money from Tony Hawk, he will do the super secret skate park tour and visit the parks that he built. So we got wind of it. I mean, it was never advertised, but the city had to know about it. So the city told a few of us what day it was going to be, and the Quicksilver bus rolls in, and it was Kevin Staub and Tony and Riley and a whole bunch of those guys. And we had probably the biggest demo that we've ever had at KSP. I would say there was 1,000 people there.
I think that's the most people that has ever been at Tyson Park. I mean, I think they said there were somewhere around 3,000 to 5,000 people. I mean, you look at the aerial shot and there's just bodies on bodies on bodies around the bowl.
When I first started skateboarding, I very much looked up to Brian Beauchesne, Doug Walker, Jay Kabler, and Trey McReynolds. Those four guys were kind of, at least in my mind, the Mount Rushmore of Knoxville skateboarding.
He loved skating. There's no one I can imagine. I mean, J.D. Murr maybe that loves skating more. I mean, he really lived it. He was our historian. He would have loved to have been able to be sitting in this chair right now. I wish it could be him.
He became the closest thing to a real big brother that I've ever had, other than my actual biological big brother. But Jay and I, he's the closest friend I've ever had. We were best friends for 30 years. He was the scene. Everything about Knoxville skateboarding came through, was approved by, or happened because of Jay Kabler.
Yeah, he just had an incredible passion for skateboarding, not just among his circle of friends, but among sharing that with anybody that he could.
And he was right there with us when we built the Unfair and did the cage, and he was doing zines, and he's one of the most into the skate scene people from Knoxville that I've ever known. That he knew the absolute history of everything in skateboarding that happened around here.
Jay Cab, oh my goodness, just such an incredible man. Probably one of the realest skateboarders ever to live, and a man that was just so passionate about everything in skateboarding. Even if it wasn't cool by the industry standards, he appreciated it. And I say that even for me, because a lot of people sometimes look on Nitro like, what is that? It's so obscure, it's so out there. But he was a man that supported everything that I did. And I remember even being a little grom at the skate park and seeing the older crew, we call them Lords of Dogtown. My parents would, because that movie came out, and they were like, these old dudes are still doing it.
It just, there was constant knowledge and just a good time. And he always wanted to get everybody together to do something, whether that was garage race or, you know, Wallows, or, you know, at the, you know, a constant session at the park to get everybody out and get them together. You know, an old man session on Friday night. You know, he constantly had something going on to get everybody together. You know, and he always had a plan. You know, he always had a plan on what was going to happen next. You know,
this guy took his camera everywhere, taking pictures. He was a part of the skate scene. If it was a ditch, if it was a ramp, if it was a contest, he was there. So Jay became like a brother, you know, a skateboard brother. And if you went skating, you had to let him know you were skating, because he, like, why didn't you call me? What's up with you? You know, skating without me, whatever. So everything in Knoxville skateboard-wise, every ramp being built, every demo, every contest, everything skateboarding went across his desk.
It's rad to see his legacy continue to carry on. As unfortunate as it was that we don't have him here anymore, we know that he's just as stoked, and the legacy is going to live forever that man carried.
But yeah, there was just something about Jay Cab. He was a really pure-hearted skateboarder. I mean, even just a few years before he passed, he was taking his personal funds and financing trips around the U.S. so he could hit every park that he could. And that was always something I admired about him. He was a pure skateboarder, and God bless him. I miss him.
Yeah, so Jay Cab, I'm sorry to see he's gone. It's tremendous loss. Heart's broken.
We've got tons of footage. Most of the footage coming from this that's going to be in this documentary was shot by Jay. It's heartbreaking that he's not here, but I'll always remember him, and I'll always, you know, he's one of the ones who helped me get to where I am in skateboarding, and I love him.